Hi, I'm Jeremy, or Dr. J,
I'm Ronnie West.
and this is Good Parents, Good Children.
Parent like your kid's life depends on it. I remember this time when I was a teenager. It wasn't long after I got my driver's license, and this family friend who he was either still a police officer getting close to retirement or he'd already retired. But anyway, we left the same place at the same time, headed to church, and I got there way too quickly. So he knew that I was speeding, right? Like he knew. And he might have seen me tear off at the beginning. But anyway, we get to church and he just sort of comes up to me looking sort of stern. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but there was this kind of warning. And it was something along the lines of just, you need to watch out, right? And it was, safety and, watch out because you might get tickets and the police and this sort of thing. But it was just this sort of warning. And then, it was a couple times with him, because I remember another time me and my buddy were going somewhere. So I'm driving my buddy to his house, and Ed, the police officer, was coming along with, right? So it's like three cars, my buddy's parents, Ed and his wife, and then me. And then I'm following behind my buddy's parents, too close. So we get there and Ed was like, you would need to buy me a ring before you ride behind that close. and so, both the bits of advice I got from Ed were about driving, as it were, because I was a 17-year-old kid. But all of that meant something different because it wasn't coming from my parents or even grandparents or aunt and uncle or anything like that, right? It's a family friend, and it's just not the same. It takes on a different tenor. It means something different. I responded to it in a different way. He can't punish me. If I act like a fool, I don't embarrass him because I'm not his child. And, he doesn't embarrass me in the same way either. There's just a different relationship. You get value from your parents, but when you get those mentorship moments or a whole mentorship relationship from somebody, it's just not the same. What about you? Do you have memories of being mentored as a youth?
Sure. And it sounds like he was looking out for you over time, in fact.
And it was more than one incident. Well, yeah, I didn't even thought about that. He clearly, that's so funny because I had not even thought about it in this way, but looking back on it, he was concerned about me, right? He was looking to, not that he would have used the word mentor necessarily, but he was looking to mentor me. He saw an opportunity to give me advice that he thought I needed, and he went for it. And I appreciate it years and years later. So, yeah.
Right. And it's not only that. It's yes, there's the area of learning, right? What he needed to give you, but there's also this fertile soil concept, right? There were things in you or your family that he thought, hey, here's somebody that I need to help out, and somebody who's going to hear me when I talk to him. Which reminds me of one of my experiences. So I was 16 and eventually even to 18, and there was this couple at church, Mark and Lisa, and Mark asked me to come work for him. It was a summer job, and then a little bit later on after that. And it was things like painting and moving equipment, but also building fences, or let's go level this gravel pit. And I'm confident that there were positive things that Mark and Lisa saw in me and that made them want to bring me up. Think they saw some good moral foundation and spiritual value, but also that they're looking at my family and saying, does Jeremy know how to use a rake all day? Does he know how to use a hammer?
Hard physical labor.
Well, sure. Yeah. Does he have a work ethic?
Yeah.
Can we build it?
Handy?
Can we build it out in him? And so I went and worked for them, and I learned this stuff on the back end that they were really interested in having some conversations with me about developing some of these basic skills. So when I go out and probably do white collar stuff like they do, that I'm more rounded. And I also learned from them about money management and kind of macroeconomics and investment and things that wouldn't have been available to me in my family, things that wouldn't have been available to me if I hadn't been willing to listen to, hey, you're going to come do backbreaking work for me for a couple months.
You know, that makes me think too, like the people, when I think about mentorship experiences in my youth, you know, I was thinking about Ed. You know, Ed was a family friend, but also there were several kids that he gave boxing lessons to. So the context of his giving me those little tidbits were that we had a relationship from us having, like, you know, not that it really took or I did it a whole lot, but we had this activity we were engaged in that he was trying to teach us. And then Eric, another family friend that was a really, you know, one of the biggest mentors of my youth, you know, he taught us how to play paintball, and we worked for him when he was building computers as a side hustle.
Oh, yeah.
And he was our sensei in martial arts. So, I mean, that may be speaking more to how do you be a good quality mentor, or who are your kids going to be attracted to as far as mentors? It's not like in a vacuum. You know, the people that I'm thinking back on as far as memorable in their impact with me as far as mentorship, well, it wasn't just them teaching me lessons. We were doing stuff together. And it wasn't just like frivolous necessarily either. It was like the activities we were doing, the time we were spending together, that was relationship building. That's the context where the mentorship was happening.
We're talking about a context of a relationship over time, right? You're talking about specific activities, but there's also this concept of skill building, right, to a certain degree. So there's martial arts. There's I'm going to be a defensive driver. Or in mine, there's, you know, I'm going to learn how to level a fence, and it's these building on these skills to have bigger lessons about character, right? It wasn't just don't speed, don't get in trouble with the law. It's like, hey, safety matters, and right, and so does like honesty, right?
Yeah. Well, there's also, like, with all those situations, there's the building of mutual respect. You know, you're engaging in activities that involve skill that you can improve in, and the people that were doing those with you already knew how to do, like, the folks you were talking about, they already had experience doing this kind of work. And so then you're doing this work with them. So you're literally doing a type of apprenticeship with them. With the other people I'm thinking of, like, they were teaching me things that they were passionate about, and they already knew how to do those things. But then what I get out of it as an adult, like, I don't box, I'm not into martial arts or paintball now. What I got out of the relationship wasn't necessarily the specific activity they were teaching me. It was the relationship we had. And then I still value activities related to exercise and those sorts of things now, which they did. It just isn't those specific ones.
All right. So imagine you didn't get your mentoring relationship. So there's some fitness activity you don't understand. Maybe you continued to speed like you did when you were a teenager, but I mean, but maybe so what? Like
what's lost?
Why are mentors necessary, or why couldn't your parents do it?
Well, so part of that speaks to the thing I was alluding to before, where it's just not the same when you get it from a mentor. For one thing, there's this feeling, it's like if you were a girl and your parents said, "Oh, you're so pretty," right? Or "We love you so much."
Doesn't count. You
or,
have to.
"You're such a strong boy." Exactly. They have to say that kind of thing, right? Which hopefully they only say it if they really believe it, but they kind of have to believe it, is how kids feel. And it's sort of true. Mentors don't, they don't have to. And so, a high quality mentor is going to be somebody who, if they compliment you, they mean it. It's sincere. They didn't just make it up out of thin air. They complimented you about a thing that they thought you deserved a compliment on, and they didn't have to compliment you in the first place.
So one of the first things that a mentor does for us then is provide a legitimate reflection.
Yeah.
Right. So a mentor is saying there's things in you that I value, and that's maybe why I've got an interest in you in the first place. right? There's great things about you. And I see that you're developing, and I see a way I can help you do that.
So yeah, just the fact that they show an interest. So a young adult, I mean, or an older adult, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter, but let's say a young adult, for this example, I guess, they look at you and they want to talk with you. They want to do stuff with you. That right there is flattering and helps you understand your own value or feel valued. So right there, that has benefit. You're more likely to listen to that person because they've shown you respect because of their interest in you. So that's useful. And then there's, I mean, we as people are such social creatures. We understand reality through social relationships. We need that in order to understand reality. I mean, you could think about the examples of like kids, if they were like, there was that kid that was raised out in the wild. I think he was in France or something, and he never learned how to talk and all of that.
Yeah.
And you could put that up to, well, he needed to be around people to learn how to talk. I think it's more fundamental than that. Like, we need people. It's not just to learn how to speak. We can't understand ourselves unless we're around people and we see ourselves through their eyes to a degree. That helps us understand things about ourselves in the world. And so you need quality mentors because you want that reflection, that framing of the world, those worldviews to be honest and accurate and wise. So that's part of having quality mentors. But also, you'll just go nuts if you don't have enough of it. You could go nuts. And if all you have is what your parents give you, what if you tend a little bit towards rebellion? Okay. Well, mentors can help you see the aspects of your parents' perspective that you better not throw away, right? They can help establish and build up and support some of the things your parents have said, and you might be a little less likely to rebel against some of those things because mentors you respect are backing your parents up. On the other hand, if you blindly follow your parents, because those are two like ends of the spectrum, archetypes of different kinds of kids, right? Well, those kids can have like tunnel vision. So then, yeah, maybe your parents are probably mostly right if they're virtuous and competent people, and they're probably more right than you if you're a kid. As you know, you're a kid and they're older than you, they have more knowledge. So in general, they're going to know a lot more than you, but you still need more information than what they can provide, different perspectives. So if you tend to have tunnel vision, quality mentors can help with that.
Yeah, well, you know, parents tend to get exasperated with this idea of, oh, you know, this other adult in my kid's life, they just said the same thing that I've been saying. Like,
oh, right.
Well, yes. And especially if you're talking about a teenager, you only have so much credibility because, you know, you're old and, oh, you know, Dad, you don't get it. Like, why would you be upset that they believed it from another source? Like, you're the person who created their chance to meet other adults in the first place, right? You're the person who cultivated that adult pool or put virtuous people in their lives. Yeah, hopefully because you want your kid influenced by the good folks around them.
Right. That's the dream, that it was deliberate, thoughtful, right? You've been actually thinking about making sure your friends and your kids' your kids' friends' parents and the adults and young adults and older kids that are around your kid, that's a good pool from which to choose mentors.
Well, this is our idea that if anything is worth doing, it's worth doing on purpose. So the most influence we can have over our kids' positive outcomes, that's how much influence we want to exert. And no, you don't have perfect control over who's in your child's life, but you got some, right? You've got, to a certain degree, you've got where you live. You've absolutely got who your friends are. You've got, to a certain degree, again, where you go to church, maybe even where they go to school. If you have options in the public school system, if you're able to private school or homeschool, right? You've got who you let your kids be around. So again, there's more opportunity for control than just like, oh, I guess it's just kind of whoever.
Well, and to make it more personal too, I remember, So my mom has talked about this overtly, like, so I've thought about this from her perspective, but looking back on it, it really rings true. And, you know, I look back on me as a kid and I feel like I would just flock to the bad kids. It's like wherever I went, I wanted to hang out with the bad kids. For whatever reason, I thought they were the cool ones. So the kids that were flunking, they were a couple of grades behind. They weren't doing good educationally. They were getting bad grades. They had rough home lives. I wanted to go talk to them. I was interested in them. So my parents had to put a lot of effort into controlling my pool of friends. And mentors to some degree, right? Because I want to go hang out with older bad kids, of course. So that's bad mentors to a degree. So they put a lot of effort into controlling my pool. My wife, Heather, she flocked to the nice kids. You know, she could have casual sorts of not close relationships with the bad kids, and she would be more likely mostly just be a good influence on them. But then her closer friends, they were all super nice, sweet kids that were looking to behave themselves and were doing well. They were overall virtuous and competent people, right? That's what she was attracted to. So her parents didn't have to put as much effort into that pool control as they did with me. So I'm hoping that my kids are in that way are more like she was than I was.
All right. So there's this broad question of why do we need mentors? And one of them is we're establishing what does reality even look like, right? What's an honest reflection, and then what are possible futures? You know, you were telling me just this morning that ideally, as humans, we'd operate like life were this open choice essay question with all possible answers available to us, but that's not how any of us operate. We operate like it's a multiple choice test, like there's a finite number of choices, right? And especially if I'm in high school, well, all right, we're probably going to graduate, and you know, I can go to technical school, or I can go to community college, or I could go to college. And if you've had some options opened to you, or I can start a business, or I can buy into a local kind of group practice of some sort. But if all you've ever heard, like you might get at a public school, is, oh, go to college, or like your life's going to be over,
right?
You've kind of got three options on the board.
Or you've got families where they're told you can't, we're not a college going family. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
Like Rudy, right? Rudy, we don't go to college. You know, this is our life. And his dad like lays out this plan of this certain kind of life, and college is excluded. So the dad he's saying, you know, life is multiple choice. And for some people, they have all these choices. We're a Rudiger. We have this choice. It's like this or jail. That's right. That's it for the Rudigers.
And so I mentioned before, some my, you know, teenage mentors, but they're still my mentors. But my mentors, Mark and Lisa, and Mark and Lisa are really in the real estate business, and so they don't do employee life. And you know, he didn't complete a college degree, so instead of doing that route of I'm going to do some liberal arts education, I'll go get a good job. You know, they were business owners, and their livelihood is investing and then selling and investing further. And for me, that item was never even really on the board. It was enough to try to add onto the board, like, Jeremy, you could consider going to a state school instead of like going to a private liberal arts school, or here's the college majors you could check. But I wish two things. I wish, one, I'd been cultivated to think there's other options at all, and a mentor could have done that. Because my family was well prepared for some things, but that wasn't one of them. And two is that there were some seeds put in there for some of what those things could be. It's like, hey, Jeremy, you're a smart guy. Maybe be a business owner. Like maybe buy one straight out of high school, right? And so our mentors are providing us possible legitimate future options that our parents can't. And this is why, by the way, that we start with, you are not enough, right? Not you can't parent or you don't have authority, only you have that.
Right.
But I am not enough to tell a child, here are what possible futures look like for you. I couldn't possibly know. By the time you're middle-aged, or even young adult and have children, you can't see, the potentiality of the future like just a small group of adults could. Well, ideally virtuous adults.
This speaks to I was going to ask you this question. And this speaks to this. Why? Okay, so we were talking about the idea that people don't treat life like it's an open-ended essay question where they're open to all possibilities, right? They treat it like it's a multiple choice question, and what the options that are available to them, those come from the perspectives that they're able to see, and and things like that. One thing that occurs to me is you have to limit your options. Mentally, you have to say, I only have these options, because the cognitive load, the amount of time and effort, the mental capacity to think about all possible options, it's too daunting. It burns too many calories, sort of, right? You just can't handle it. So you have to limit yourself.
Excuse me for interrupting. It's legitimately impossible.
Exactly.
It produces too much cognitive dissonance. You result in this cognitive conflict called approach avoid, which means every time I approach one option, I was like, this one over here looks great. So every time I approach this option, this one over here looks great, right? And so, well, it's the question, how many things can we even have on the table? You can't have the entire constellation.
Right. That's almost like, that reminds me of the Buridan's donkey or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
That's right.
Is that the right name? Buridan?
Listen,
something like that.
I'm familiar with the idea.
It's the donkey thing. Where the donkey, it's like, the donkey is equally hungry and equally thirsty, and there's water over here and there's food over there, and they can't make a choice. It's like that. If you allow yourself too many options, then you are too confused and you're blinded by it. But here's the other thing too. Your parents, as they progress in life, they cut off certain options.
That's right.
So as time goes by, it's like, I'll never do that.
We all do.
I'll never do. Everybody does. And so by the time they have you, they're 20, 30, 35, 40, whatever they are, and they've already done that for a while. So there's a bunch of things that are happening. For one thing, my dad had me when he was 30. So I wasn't really, so I really knew him as 35 plus or even 40 plus man. I don't have an example of what it's like to be a 20-year-old man or 25-year-old man or 30-year-old man unless I have mentors. So I need mentors to bridge the gap of what's it like to be those ages when I didn't know my dad. So there's that. The other thing is, your parents, no matter how wise, no matter how virtuous and competent they aren't going to know what all of the great options are for you. And so there's a chance that some options that they've never considered might actually be better for you than the ones they might hand to you. And that's not out of disrespect for parents. Our philosophy is extremely respectful of parents. And, we really believe that parents have, kind of all the authority over the kids. And, that's our perspective. But you're not enough. You do need other perspectives. I think there's a really clear example. In the 40s and 50s, I don't know the exact decades, but let's say the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Okay.
If you're able to go get a college degree, it is pretty much always worth it, right?
Well, that's correct.
The return on investment is amazing.
And because if you're going to get a college degree, that means you're becoming an accountant, a doctor, or a manager, all of which have better quality of life, all of which have better pay. There's not during that time, I'm going to leave high school and be financially successful. Not in the same way.
Well,
you need to be in a family dynasty.
Right. I'm not sure I don't know if that's definitely true, but I will say this. What does seem to be the case is, if you are able to successfully go into college, successfully graduate from college, you've almost written a ticket to better success by far than if you personally hadn't. It's like going to college always made you better off. And that was true pre-1950, 60, 70. And then at some point in there, it becomes mostly still true, but not as true as it used to be. And then at some point in the 90s or the early 2000s, it starts to look like, wow, you might have to go to college for most people in order to do okay, but the return on investment has started to shrink. Well, if you're a parent, you were born in the 50s, if you were a baby boomer, you're born in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, you're telling your child who was born in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, we've got to go to college. So like, what scripture is being written for you? Well, there's only the college script. And we're still struggling with this. I don't think parents know what other scripts to give their kids. There's not clear and obvious other options. I mean, you can have your kid go to the military, but then what do they do after the military?
Sure.
So for most people, going to college is the same script, but it's not as an attractive. It's more available, but it's not nearly as attractive as it was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or whatever. But see, if your kid gets a high quality mentor that has a different, they're wise, they're virtuous, they're competent, those mentors will have other perspectives other than the parent. And it's almost like the parent, by doing, and again, you can't just straight up pick the mentor for your kid, because mentorship is going to be a mutual, like the mentors have to want to mentor your kid, and your kids are going to have to want to be mentored by them. You can kind of have an idea, you can have some selection over the pool, not necessarily the specifics, just like you can't pick your kids' friends exactly. But if they're high quality, then you're able to, it's almost like you're hiring a consultant for your business, right? It's like no CEO is wise enough to make all decisions for their company without any input from anybody else. You need other input. And it's the same thing with parents. Your kid needs other perspectives. They're going to seek this out. They're going to be mentored. Like, it's just like they're going to have friends. If they're around other kids, they're going to have friends. So you better hope that they're pretty good friends. And it's the same thing with mentors. They're going to have relationships with people that they look up to that are older than them. And that's what we're calling mentors. And so you can farm off some of this responsibility of giving your kids advice that can be overt, being an example to your kids, helping your kids have a sense of what virtue is, what it looks like. What does it look like to be a good man or a good woman who's 20 or 25 or 30, younger than you as a parent when your kid is a teenager or whatever. And what are other options, right?
Well, that's it. And so in an ideal scenario, the mentor is really an autonomous agent of the parents. So what we really don't advocate is that there's child-adult relationships in a vacuum. No, the good quality mentors know the parents.
Right.
And it's, hey, Dad, I was taking Billy paintball, and by the way, did you actually know he's got a pretty savvy business mind? Have you ever talked about business school? Right. Which really brings up the question, how do you make sure your kids' mentors are good?
Right. Well, it's like I think part of that is going to involve, and this is with everything, right? Like there's always going to be, in most of our videos, we're giving advice. It's like one of the pieces of it is you as a parent need to be virtuous and competent. Well, it's that. And then there's make sure your friends are the kinds of people you wouldn't mind your kids becoming. Right. So it's easy to have friends where, especially when you're a young person, you have some friends and you're like, I don't really want to be like this person, but I'm still around them. You know what I mean? And they're not the best influence on me, but I mean, I know that, and it's okay. You may not want to keep those really immature people, those people that you don't want your kids to be like at all. You may not want to be around them a whole lot and have your kids around them a whole lot when your kid is 5, 10, 15 years old. And then they think they're supposed to look up to this person, but you don't want your kid to be like them at all. So that's one thing, your children are going to, their mentorship pool. The things I'm thinking of are like, the groups that you're involved in, religious organizations, clubs, whatever, the adults and older kids that go to those places, part of the mentorship pool. As a parent, your friends, right? Your friends are part of the mentorship pool, especially like your younger friends. You're 40, you have a younger friend who's 30. He's not married yet. He seems like the cool guy, right? Potential mentor for your kid, right? Your kid's going to go, oh, that guy's cool, right? So you want to make sure your friends, your children's friends' parents, you hope that they're pretty virtuous and competent, because those are potential mentors. Or even if they're not a mentor where they're going to have like this long lasting relationship, they may have sort of mentorship moments, give little tidbits of advice and things like that. And hopefully the advice your kids are getting is not going to be awful, really perverse, terrible advice. Because you can get people that are, so this is something that I was thinking about with this. It's like there's this feeling of, I wish I knew then what I know now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which speaks to the whole, why do people want to mentor, which we haven't really gotten to that too much.
No, let's go there.
That's a piece. Okay. So, and that, I think that that's a huge part of it. I wish I knew then what I know now. So mentors are almost following the golden rule, right? You can't go back in time and tell 13-year-old Jeremy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you can tell some kid who's 13, who you see a little bit of yourself in, or who you don't, but you respect the kid, or you hope good things for the kid, or whatever. You can give them little tidbits. Well, what happens if somebody wants to do that? Because I think everybody wants to leave a piece of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they want to leave a legacy. They want to do that. What if that person's really cynical? Right? What if their regrets are gross? You know, like the old saying, you don't regret what you did, you regret what you didn't do. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that, but really gross people can have that way of thinking, and they wish they'd been naughtier, right? Like the advice they would give to 13-year-old self would be, do more gross things with your life as a teenager. Be more disgusting. I don't want them alluding to or overtly giving that advice to my kids.
You've reminded me of, I had a friend in high school. He was a couple years older than me, and he'd had a really rough childhood, and in part because of that, family disruption, and he'd been abused, kind of that sort of thing. He'd lived a good deal more life than me, and I think this fella viewed himself as a mentor to me, and he wanted to do some of this, like, Jeremy, you got to get out and see more of this, like you got to smoke cigarettes and drink beer and like go off with girls. And I think mom and dad just really knew that I wasn't going to follow any of that with this fellow. But it was this thing where if I'd stayed around him into my 20s, worse, like 30s, I mean, I don't know, like having that kind of influence around surely isn't going to enhance me as a person.
Well, you might split the difference. You're like, well, I'm not going to do that stuff, but it would, like, you'd move the goal line a little bit towards them, maybe.
All right, so I'm being reminded of this idea in leadership theory, which is that you want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and more motivated than you, and like more energetic than you. We want to surround ourselves with people that are virtuous or more competent than we are. I want the people in my life around my children to be inspirational, so that when they see these adults that they're around, they're like, oh, whoa, that family seems really fun. I wonder why all of their kids like sit and listen at church. Or let's see, there's another one.
They read so much.
We do have that around us. Like, how are these other kids reading so many books each week?
Right. Well, one of the things oh shoot, I think I almost lost what I was going to say. Crud. You remind me of something really. Oh, you answered your own question a little bit, because a minute ago you were saying what do you do to help make sure your kids get quality mentors, or how do you make sure the mentors that they have or they're about to have are quality? Well, help your children be as virtuous and competent as they can be for their age, right? So that might involve help them get a sense of how to vet friends. How do you go through a vetting process of your friends? How do you know that friends are going to be good friends? How do you set boundaries with friends that aren't so great, right? Because sometimes your kids will have friends that they're just around and they're not great, but your kid can't avoid them entirely. But you can teach your kids not to be overly influenced by them, right? But if your kids are pursuing virtue and competence in an age-appropriate way, and that, you've got them doing that, and they have a sense of how to identify friends that aren't the best influence on them, aren't the best friends.
Yeah.
They can do the same thing with mentors, older kids and young adults. They'll hear terrible advice, right? And then Jiminy Cricket will come up and be like, I don't know. That doesn't sound like what your dad Geppetto was saying. Maybe we shouldn't follow him to Pleasure Island. You know, like maybe that's bad advice, you know? And then the kid will go, oh, yeah, that is terrible advice, you know? So that's a great way to try to, have a little bit of control over which people end up mentoring your kids, is if you've already got your kids trained to identify terrible advice and bad ideas.
Well, something that's really gone out of style and we've emphasized in our families is this knowing how to identify what's virtuous, like naming these things out loud and talking about them in our stories and our movies. So using words like honesty, respect, integrity, courage, boldness, like talking about these things, but then like intentionally selecting and reading fables to find them, right? So if we read the grasshopper and the ant,
yeah, it's a good one,
right? Then there's a lot of virtue, but we're talking about investment. We're talking about responsibility, and so
and I will say I think it's the Merry Melodies cartoons from the 30s and 40s. Disney's has
Merry Melodies,
amazing like 6-minute video on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Major recommend. And this video's over. Go watch the grasshopper and the ant on YouTube. Fantastic. And at the end of that version,
mm-hmm.
the ants are merciful to not to spoil anything for the 6-minute cartoon, but the ants are merciful to the grasshopper at the end. And it's like, so it teaches so many virtues. It's so much better than anything Disney puts out now, in my personal yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No, well, it's this
good stuff.
So talking about being explicit about these things, we're seeking it out in our media. We're pointing it out to our children on purpose. But this is because another reason that people mentor, another reason we choose to mentor, is we think we want to keep growing. So people who mentor on purpose really believe that they're building themselves, right? How can I possibly teach somebody about safety and honesty while driving if I'm not living it, if I can't articulate it, right? So this big part of mentorship is, as I develop other people, I develop myself.
If the mentors are good, because you have to remember that kid you were talking about before, mm-hmm. There's this sense of mentorship as legacy building, or mentorship mm-hmm. as sort of evangelizing your worldview.
Yes.
People that suck, they want to mentor too, right? Mm-hmm. They want more people to be like them. Listen, like the 16 or 17-year-old kid that's doing drugs and then like passes the drugs over to the 13 or 14-year-old kid alongside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they can get more people doing the things they're doing, it makes them feel like the thing I'm doing is not that bad. You know, there's a sense of, I want to introduce people. Yeah. It's almost like I want to introduce people to the world and to the way I look at the world and the way I experience the world. So if a person is pursuing virtue and competence and they invite people that are younger than them into the world, and they invite them into their worldview and how they deal with the world, right? Mm-hmm. And that comes back to the establishing how you see the future in the world, and like if life is a multiple choice question sheet, like expanding the answers in the multiple choice question, like how am I going to deal with these situations? These are my options. Good mentors expand that in a great way, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you could start a small business. You can do these things. This is how you can deal with life. Bad mentors, older kids that are bad influences, they're like, you could do these awful, terrible things. Wouldn't that be great? I'm doing them. Look how I turned out, right? Like there's that kind of a mentality. So I guess all I'm trying to say is the desire to mentor doesn't come from an only good place, potentially. It can come from I want there to be more people like me. And that's true even if you're terrible.
No, and that's very much right. Now we're in the space of virtue, generally speaking, is hard. It requires challenge, it requires sacrifice, it requires debasing honesty, and habitual vice is easy. Like that's why people do it.
It's a downhill train track. Yeah, floating down the river.
Sure. And so if you adopt a growth mindset. You have to say, there's stuff wrong with me that I want to make better. And if your children do and mentors do, you have to say, hey, let's all grow together, but there's stuff wrong with me that I want to change. And if you're bringing people into a vice worldview of corruption, hey, there's nothing wrong with me, and this stuff is really fun and pleasurable. Let's do more of it.
Right. You're chasing endorphins.
Mm-hmm.
And endorphin chasing, it's an easy sell. It's like, hey, listen, there's this guy selling endorphins over there for cheap. Let's get some of that. Right? Endorphins? Dopamine. I think I meant dopamine. Either way, you're chasing those sweet, sweet chemicals and you feel so good. And virtue can make you feel good too, but it comes from a more challenging place. It's like, do I get my dopamine from exercising really hard, or do I get it by the ounce? You know,
and it's also serotonin. Those are smaller hits over time. Versus dopamine are quick hits and then drop.
That's why I've got you, the neuro guy,
the neuro nerd. So
you were saying something a second ago. I want to key in on, or it made me think of this, and I forgot your exact point, but it was something kind of like, there's something surprising about this, or there's things we need to do about this. Well, there's an unattractive thing, or a thing that I think our society considers to be unappealing that you need to do if we're going to do this, right? The hard work of being a good mentor, or, you know, specifically choosing the pool of mentors, helping our children in particular, helping our children know which mentors to listen to and pursue and which to ignore a little bit or not take too much advice from. Yeah. Judging. You must judge, right? Like there's only two options. There's judging and telling yourself the truth that you judge, or judging and lying to yourself and telling yourself, I don't judge people. It's false. Everybody makes judgments, but the deal is we want to make virtuous, wise, hopefully merciful and gracious judgments, but you have to embrace judgment. And that is like, I judge this person's character to be good. Therefore, that is a good mentor. I judge the advice they just gave to be good. It's good quality advice. I hadn't thought of that before, but it sounds like it's a path of competence and virtue. Like that's good stuff. Or you judge a person, you say, something's not right. They're making bad choices with their life, and they're trying to get me to make bad choices too. Well, you've got to make judgments. And so we have to train our kids to make quality, wise judgments. And we need mentors to help our kids make quality and wise judgments.
So we're using some vocab words, which are kind of old fashioned, like virtue and vice and value and growth. And you'll hear some of these days, but it's usually in the context of look within and find what your path is. And we're in fact saying, look without, and you can judge what is good, and you can judge it on a standard. And mentors are one of these people who offer the real reflection of, this is what you look like as a person, mom and dad or kid.
Right. Well, and this is sort of on topic, but not exactly, but something I've been thinking about recently, people that are thought of as being judgy, or who talk about morality a lot, or whatever, if they ever get caught in a mistake, then people will be like, oh, you're a hypocrite, right? Like they point the finger and they say, oh, you're a hypocrite. Okay. So on the topic of us saying you pursue virtue and competence and this sort of, we're pointing towards a higher standard.
That's right.
So here's the deal. If your standard is such that you're able to achieve it perfectly
all the time,
right? You don't make mistakes. You achieve your goal as far as virtue and competence and morality, like whatever your goals are, you're achieving it perfectly. You set your standard too low, right? You lowered the bar and are just stepping right over it. So there's a degree to which if a person is setting a standard of something they're trying to be, it needs to be high enough that they're struggling, and that, yeah, they probably make some mistakes. There's a difference between my standard is high and I make mistakes, and my standard is high and I ignore it from time to time, right? I ignore it from time to time to do what I want to do. That's more like the hypocrite. The person who they set their standards high and yet they do make mistakes, but hopefully they're humble about it the whole time, right? Like they never claim to not make mistakes, but they're caught in some error or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're truly a hypocrite, right? That doesn't mean they're not pursuing that. That means they're human and they make errors. So, but my point with all of that is don't call people hypocrites too often.
Well, and sure. Well,
set your standard appropriately high.
Yeah, hypocrite here is a character accusation. It's not, hey, you took an action that's not consistent with your value or the virtue you espouse. That's really a different thing. Now, if we don't aim up, then we can't possibly hope to grow, right?
Yeah.
And also, you set the bar too low. Well, if I aim down, like I'm actually going to trip. Like there's roots down there.
Right. You shrink. Yeah. As you aim down, your moral character shrinks. And as you aim appropriately high, then you give yourself some grace in the fact that you're not going to be perfect, but you're pointed towards something better than yourself. Real ideals. And this is a way where our society is anti-ideal, right? Because ideals judge you. You know, if you have an understanding of what you need to be, right? Like I need to be, and you can list out virtues, which we'll do in future videos. We'll get more explicit about what we think are appropriate virtues. But if you've got explicit virtues and you say, I need to pursue these things as best I can, and I want to be getting better and better at this, and you've done that, then those virtues judge you in a sense. You know, you compare yourself to what you know you ought to be, and you see that you're lacking. And that's okay. You know, you don't need to feel terrible about it. You hopefully realize that going in, you chose difficult virtues, things that you're not going to be perfect about, but you keep pursuing it. So grace and mercy are also virtues, and we should be merciful to ourselves, realizing that we're going to make errors, and we should be merciful to other people. We still need to judge ourselves, and we need to judge others to the degree that we protect ourselves from their bad choices and their bad influence. And if you can't judge the people that are influencing you, your potential friends, then how can you help your kids judge potential friends and mentors? If you don't know how to judge yourself so that you can try to improve, well, then how can you expect to show your kids or teach your kids how to make judgments and then improve themselves? Like you've got to work on some of that stuff for yourself. Like if we're talking about trying to control the pool of potential mentors, that's going to be part of it.
Well, so Ronnie, I know your kids. They're a good group. I've known them for a while. I get to see them in person, and they will have grown in demonstrated respect or patience or interest. And I wonder then, how do you prepare your children to be mentored, to attract good mentors?
Right. So there's a bunch of stuff, and some of this, might be considered sort of old fashioned or whatever, but there's the general concepts. And I wrote some of this stuff down before. It's like general concepts of things you want your kids to be doing. And if they do this, they're more likely to attract mentors. Okay. Your kids should be respectful. So you're looking at mentors, they're people that have lived more, they know more. Well, that commands some respect. Your kids need to know how to respect. So who do they practice respecting first? Well, first they respect you as the parent. If you don't train your kids to respect you, why would they respect anybody else? Like you're the first person they should be respecting. So you need to train your kids to respect you. And then next is probably grandparents, aunts and uncles, like other family members. They need to practice respecting them. And then in an age appropriate way, learn how to respect other adults and that sort of thing. So there's respect. Then there's also these two other ones that are sort of related. And that is, you'd like your kids to be friendly and interesting, right? You want your kids to practice friendliness. So to get more specific, kids go through phases where they won't shake hands, they won't make eye contact, they won't speak up or speak at all. That's not necessary. The shyness thing is an excuse. You can train kids to stop engaging in those behaviors. Shyness, I can't think of the word. Shyness is not like height or numbers of hair on your head.
Shyness isn't
an immutable characteristic.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah,
what were you going to say?
not that.
Oh, okay.
You got there.
It's not. It's a label for a pattern of behavior. A pattern of behavior which is changeable. Now, some kids being exuberant, high energy, extroverted, social will come natural to them, right? And then other kids, it won't. Who cares?
Well,
Whether it becomes natural or not, train them. Stop the shyness. They need to make eye contact. They need to learn the names of adults. I mean, it's not easy. So this isn't an age appropriate way. My 10 and 12-year-old struggle with knowing all the adults in their life, but I'm having them work on that so that when they greet the adults, they're not saying, you know, Brooklyn's mom. They call her by her name, you know? And so knowing the names, speaking up, making eye contact, I'll tell you right now, if adults are looking for people to give advice to, kids to give advice to, kids to pass on a legacy to, kids to help out, they want to do this whole, if I knew then what I know now, and share that, some of that, you know, eye contact, knowing their name, speaking up so you can talk, like that, these basic, they go a long way.
Well,
like this stuff is all part of it.
Or, you know, just not being a general behavioral problem. Right. Like if my child is really loud or tantruming or running all around the building at, you know, at church or the supermarket or something, there's not time for mentorship because you're having to help me rein the child in. Right. If the child is sitting politely and is friendly, there's opportunity more for this
what's like
growth relation.
Kids are going to make sure they're going to get the attention they need. Right.
Sure. Well, and you're talking about respect and friendliness, and somewhere in there, I just heard be conversational, like knowing how to speak with older children and adults.
Right. Well, that's like, okay, kids can learn how to, be conversationalists. Like I remember watching Anne of Green Gables as a kid, and then other like really old movies, and they'll talk about how to talk. Or they'll say, oh, he's such a good conversationalist. I don't think we talk about that in that way anymore. But like the realization that that is a skill you can work on, and then actually talking about the skill socially, like, oh, that person's good at that. You know, we don't do that as much anymore, but it's a skill, and kids can learn how to do it. It's like you share appropriate things with the people you're with, you know, while making eye contact and speaking up and enunciating, but you share things with them. And you ask them questions, and you're genuinely interested. Like kids can be trained to do all that.
Oh, no, that's quite right. I met an adult one time, an adult in his 40s, by the way, who asked me, you know, kind of what team sport I was into, and I'm not into any team sports, or I wasn't at the time. And you know, I'm not into team sports, but I like martial arts, and I like individual Olympic sports. I named some. 10 minutes go by, you know, so which football team do you like? Well, you know, I don't really like any football team. Now I might have a different answer, but this is just true from back then. And he must have tried it 4 times, and I ended up coming off pretty poorly to him. Like he's like, well, you know, this guy's just like blowing me off. I met your kids this morning, and they're telling me about the books they're reading, which I haven't read, so that's interesting. Telling me what genres they like and asking me about what I read.
Yeah, good.
Right? So
I'm glad to hear that.
But, you know, at least in these instances, here your children are outperforming this parent in his 40s.
Right.
Right.
Well, I will say, how old were you when this was going on? When was this?
Oh, I was early 20s.
See, what early 20s Jeremy should have done is said, oh, I'm not really into that. Why don't you tell me about your favorite team? I don't care about professional sports, but if somebody wants to bring up sports, I will ask them all kinds of questions about the sports they like.
Thank you for that appropriate judgment. It really was a failure on my part. It was
a mutual failure, and it wasn't working in either direction.
If you don't know me personally yet, I really am being sincere. That was in fact my failure. He also should have been more skilled.
Both, yeah. And that's the thing is, you only need, if you're able to go 80%, you only need the other person to go the other 20. You know, it's like, it does take 2 people to make the conversation go. But if one of them is pretty stinking good at being conversational, then they can keep the thing going with the other person only participating a bit. But it does take 2 to tango. You know?
Let's do one more. How do you mentor a brat?
Right. So then this comes to, we haven't explicitly said this. I think it's fair to say that you have a responsibility to be a good mentor to the people that you're able to be a good mentor to. So, implicitly, we may have alluded to this, be a good mentor, right? Look for chances to be a good mentor. And if you have the chance to mentor a person who will listen to you, but maybe they wouldn't be the most attractive mentor, right? It's like, that's this scenario. How do you mentor a brat?
Sure.
Right? If you have the chance to mentor somebody who'd be difficult to mentor, a brat in this case, go for it. But I think, realizing they need it and keeping in mind how badly they need it, keeping in mind that they probably aren't getting quality mentors easily because they're not appealing to be mentored, and then be willing to put in a lot of effort with patience, is part of that. Because you don't want to spend, like we talked about this before, mentorship relationships require time. Like there's this time investment. You're doing stuff with people. Well, what is the word we would use to describe a kid you don't want to spend much time around? Maybe a brat, right?
All right.
Like that's the title of kid you don't want to spend much time around is brat, kind of.
So I was going to start with, all right, let's define terms. I put it out there provocatively, but I'm certainly thinking about a child who has temper tantrums, is disrespectful in conversation with adults, is difficult to punish, screams in public. So, some of these sorts of things.
Right. They're bad at all the stuff that I said you'd be good at. Make eye contact, like listen, be conversational.
Well, and so how do you mentor this a child who's having these sorts of behavioral problems? And it's not as simple as you don't, but it's kind of close. It's before I vest into you, let's think about your bright future. It's like, maybe I can help your parent know how to rein some of that in.
I actually remember there was a kid who I ran into who was difficult to be around, and he was 11 or 12. And I think, with kids like that, chances are the parents are engaging in, I think most likely the parents are engaging in one of two mistakes, probably lots of other things, but two things come to mind. One, they are too harsh with the kid. I don't see that super frequently myself, but that is a possibility for sure. And that might be more old school parenting, like they're too harsh on the kid. So that'd be like verbally abusive and this sort of thing. What I've seen more often though is they're not honest with the kid. Like they aren't honest with them. They don't punish them. They don't discipline them. They're not having interventions with the child, and the kid's not getting that kind of feedback they need. So he was 11 or 12 or something like that at the time. And I just told him, I was like, you're not being enjoyable to be around. I don't want to be around you.
Did you?
And if you want people to be around you, you need to make yourself more enjoyable to be around. And I mean, it looked like he might have kind of gotten it. I mean, and I'm just telling the truth. Like, that is actually, if I was just trying to hurt somebody's feelings, that's a pretty mean thing to say, right? But I wasn't. I mean, I'm trying to look out for the kid. Yeah. In that moment, I felt like that was the most loving thing I could possibly do for him. I was like, you need to sort yourself out because you're not going to make friends this way. And that's part of what we're talking about with this mentorship thing is the kids that need it the most are the ones that are going to attract the fewest mentorship moments.
Sure.
And the fewest mentorship relationships.
But when you were speaking just now, I heard, so we want to bring up our children so that when they're older children and teens, they're good mentors.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
So really, like most everything we talk about, it comes back to you have to become the best version of yourself that you can. You have to grow as a parent, because then those people around you, and most importantly, your children, are going to become their best, most developed versions as well.
Right. I had a few bits more practical advice. I'm just going to run through real quick.
Sure.
Okay. So speak when spoken to, speak up. So this is one. At home, practice conversation skills. Right? Talk to your kids. Like, just have conversations with your kids when they're pretty young. Ask them questions. When they ask questions, don't ignore them. And as an aside, I think technology can get in the way of this, right? If a lot of the family time is spent watching TV or you're on your phone, they're on their tablet, whatever it is, that can get in the way of this. And if you have more not that that's all bad or anything, just make sure there's some balance there at least. But if you are reading to your kids, and not just like the 3 and 4 year olds, but you're reading to the kids a little bit as time goes by, stories that are a little difficult for them at their age. And then you can have conversations about it. Right? They ask questions, you share information. That's conversation practice. They can use that with adults and older kids later. I'm going to tell you this too right now. If your kids are good at this, they will attract mentors. You know how it's hard to get that 14-year-old or 16-year-old that you like and respect. They're doing some good things. It might be hard sometimes to get them interested in hanging out with your 10 or 12-year-old, right? Like there's this divide.
Yeah.
If you're 2 years different in the preteen to teen age range, it's like you're an untouchable. It's like there's this strict social hierarchy, and 17, 18-year-olds there at the top, and 12-year-olds are trash, right? Well, if your kids are really good at this stuff, they speak up, they ask questions, they're interested and interesting, older kids will listen to them and talk to them once in a while, right? And if they have good judgment, then they'll know what advice to listen to and what advice not to, But practicing the conversation skills. Here's another one: never flopping. So, I'm not into professional sports, but I've heard of this term flopping apparently is a thing in soccer, I guess, primarily. But you get, or basketball, you get hit, but it's like nothing, or you look like you got hit, and then you act like it's a big deal for the sake of the coaches.
Because I've got to get the foul.
Yeah. Kids really like to do this with gullible parents or parents that like taking care of their kids. Please don't encourage flopping. You want your kids to play rough but careful, right? You want your kids to wrestle nice, okay? These are things they need to do, right? Play, that's good. That's a good kind of play. If they're floppers, well, they're going to miss out on that. No one wants to wrestle with a flopper. No one wants to play rough with a flopper. I mean, especially if the parents rush in and act like whoever did it is a terrible person. Oh, you hurt my child. Oh, come on. And this, I blame the parents, the flopping. No. Very, very bad. And then the whining. If your child whines, this is a simple rule. If they whine, they don't get what they want. Please, all families, follow this rule. Child whines, they don't get what they want. And who wants to mentor a whiner? Really? I don't want to mentor a whiner. I don't want to talk to a whiner. I don't want to be around a whiner. Brats are whiners. Yeah, be a winner, not a whiner. You run into the kid where all they ever say is no, and they want to argue about everything, and they're a know-it-all.
Yeah.
Especially if they have no sense of humor. Now, a kid who's contrary but is messing around and joking, that can work if your kid is working on their humor, right?
Yeah.
If they're pretty advanced socially and they're able to kind of make jokes, maybe. But the know-it-all, arguing, contrarian, watch out. If your kid's like that, practice conversation with them more and help them figure out how to be a little bit more agreeable, because that does not attract good mentors. You want to get your kid to put people above technology and toys, right? Just people above technology, toys, and books. Mostly probably technology, because that's the most addictive of them and the most distracting. But if you're having a social event, your 15-year-old son who's a nerd, don't let him play video games the whole time, even if there's nobody his age, right? Like you invited the families over, and they have little kids and they have adults. Your son needs to know how to talk to little kids and adults. He shouldn't be playing on his phone or his computer the whole time. What do you think? I'm not sure if you agree with that one. You made a face.
Oh, goodness. That's just so far away from mentors at this point.
Oh, no, I don't agree. Right? Okay. How is he going to mentor the 10-year-old that's there if he's on his phone? He can't. That's an opportunity for the 10-year-old gone. How is he going to get mentored by the 30-year-old parent of the 10-year-old or the 40-year-old parent of the 10-year-old? He can't. He's on his phone. I have seen kids miss out on opportunities because they choose to put things above people. And they're missing out on this stuff. I think this is integral. Yeah. I think this is vital. Your kids, we're talking about how do they have these mentors. I'm glad you said that, because other people, you guys probably were thinking the same thing. I didn't sell this correctly. You can miss out on these opportunities if you don't keep your eye out for them. And people are more important than things. They're more important than animals. They're more important than technology. People are important. Relationships are important. Your kids need to value people. And if you want, mentors are people too. And if you want to value mentorship, you need to value people. And that means you put people above technology and all this stuff. I mean, this is a deeper philosophical point or something, but I think that's key with training your kids.
All right. So we're landing on valuing people. And one of the current symptoms is utilizing technology when we really ought to be in a social space.
Yes, right. Like there's this opportunity for relationship building, for social time. I mean, take it. Like, okay, if a kid's been socializing all day or whatever for a long period of time, I'm not talking about that. But in general, you know, take those opportunities. And I think I've got two more specifics that I wrote down I want to hit. Your kids need to be teasable. Take a joke, right? Adults really need to take a joke. If you think about any skills that kids need to have, like adults need to have, kids need to have. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with mentors? Well, how are mentors going to connect with kids? Humor is going to be a very big part of that for a lot of people, right? You go in, you want to talk to the 10-year-old or the 15-year-old or whatever. You make some jokes, you tease them, you mess. Like we have this neighbor girl, and she likes to wear shirts with bands from the 70s and 80s. Has she heard any Aerosmith songs? No. Can she name a Rolling Stones song? No. She's got the big, you know, tongue sticking out symbol for the Rolling Stones on her shirt. And I'm like, you don't know any satisfaction? Can't get no satisfaction? Nothing. No.
No response.
No idea, right? Paint it black, nothing, doesn't know. So, you know, I'm messing around, I'm joking with her, I'm teasing her. She knows how to take a joke. She's easy to talk to, you know, like that works. But you get kids who can't take a joke, they can't get teased. They're going to struggle. Like that's an important social skill, knowing how to take a joke. And then the final like specific advice, and this is a little bit more overarching, but I think this is still related to this, is you want to teach your kids how to empathize. And that this would speak to being a mentor, getting opportunities to mentor for older kids and young adults. And then also for, you know, for kids who want, kids need to learn how to empathize. And this, you know, if you're in a conversation and you ask someone questions, what they like, what they don't like, what are their opinions, what are you trying to do? One of the things you're trying to do is get enough of their perspective so that you're able to empathize them and understand them. That's part of how the conversation can like take on a life of its own. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know where the conversation is going to go. Being a good conversationalist has to do with all those skills. Empathy is part of that. You know, you get people that are bad conversationalists. They don't know how to empathize, maybe. At least sometimes that can be part of it. They don't know how to get that back and forth going, or they don't care. You know, and that might have to do with care about people, right? Empathy, caring about people, wanting to know people. If your kids show genuine interest, that's part of the empathy. That's part of the conversational skills. That's part of the asking questions. They can get those relationships, and then they'll, you know, they can just get, as we've been really trying to sell, they can get so much value out of that. And you're doing a favor for the mentors because they can be better people for having done that and had that relationships. It's not just for your kids. Training up kids who are good mentees, that's good for the world. That's good for the people around them.
Oh, it is. Okay. You've
tried to land it.
Well, you've talked us back to
It's like you think I went off the rails or something. It's like you finally brought us back on course after that meandering bit of nonsense. No, I'm just kidding.
Brought us back to why be a mentor? Because if you want to make the world a better place, be a better person. If you want to make the world a really better place, make somebody else a better person.
Yes. In the word, let me see if I can get the quote right. In the words of Skinny Pete from Breaking Bad, and that, yo, how's he put it? And that's church, yo, for real. I probably butchered that.
Stay good out there.
Hi, I'm Ronnie West.
And I'm Jeremy, or Dr. J.
This is Good Parents, Good Children.
Parent better so you can judge your friends.